We'll stay with that mess because despite the fact that the Albanese government should be under pressure today following yesterday's rate hike and the Treasurer's refusal to accept the view of experts that it's his spending driving inflation up and spiking rates, it was yet another bad day for the Conservative side of politics. And that won't change as long as the Liberals and the Nationals continue to sit separately in the Parliament and an unworthy government gets to go on the attack at their expense, allowing Labor to get off almost scot-free.
They can't stop talking about themselves, Mr Speaker, each and every day. Sky News doesn't have 30 seconds where there's not one of them sitting in their studio.
Changing schools, changing classes, changing teachers, changing seats. There's a bit of that going on over there as well.
I note yesterday we had a question from the member for Clark where he predicted yesterday that the crossbench was likely to soon exceed the opposition with more defections. I don't know if he knew what was going to happen today, but it has turned out to be prophetic. What I would say, though, is careful what you wish for. You might not necessarily want the people who you're about to get.
All that blokey bravado, it feeds their ego in the moment in the chamber. When Australians hit with a rate rise, watch that back at night at 6 o'clock or on their devices, however they get the news, it disgusts them. Now, at one level, the coalition simply just has to get itself sorted out, reform the relationship, and the Liberal leadership too must be resolved as quickly as possible because in politics, disunity is death. The real question, though, is not so much who leads the Liberal Party, but what it and the coalition more broadly actually stands for. Because unless it stands for something, clear policies that are different from Labor's, that voters will think is change for the better, the Liberal Party won't just be down, it could be out as well. Just like the old United Australia Party that disintegrated in 1943 after a period of leadership instability, coalition disunity and a landslide Labor win. Lessons in history, hey? This week has seen a further collapse in support for the Liberal national parties, down from 21% in Newspoll last week to just 19% in that Redbridge poll on Monday. And a further rise in the One Nation vote from 22% last week to 26% this week. All in all, that's a 13-point drop in support for the coalition since last year's, what we thought was then diabolical, election result. Now, there is no mystery to any of this. If you're a regular here and you've watched this show, I've been warning for a long time that coalition voters, Liberal voters especially, are fed up to their back teeth with a party that's been letting them down for almost a decade. Put simply, that's because they have not been a clear alternative to a Labor Party that's moved further and further to the green left. Under Malcolm Turnbull, the coalition was just as climate obsessed as Labor, despite the damage this was doing even back then to power prices, jobs and heavy industry. And it's all just got worse, hasn't it? Under Scott Morrison, well, the coalition drank the Turnbull Kool-Aid and embraced the insanity of net zero, even though fighting Labor's energy policy had given Morrison his miracle win in 2019. Go figure that one. And under both of them, Turnbull and Morrison, immigration went way up to over 200,000 people a year, pandemic aside, a figure that's more than double the average of the Howard years. Now, Peter Dutton could have won last year's election after defeating Anthony Albanese's pet policy, the divisive race-based voice. But they did nothing with that win. And they blew it because he and his Liberal team failed to create a clear contrast with Labor. They didn't fight for their energy policy. They didn't fight against Labor's capital gains wealth tax. And they certainly failed to go after the energy and union follies that have given Australians the biggest drop in their living standards across the entire OECD. Instead, the then coalition tried to make it a contest on who could give the biggest handout. And that's a contest that Labor's always going to win. Aside from the fact it's not a conservative way to manage economic policy either, there's nothing that Labor won't spend to buy an election. Is it any wonder that voters are giving up on a party that's blown hot and cold on almost every issue and that tries to be all things to everyone? So here's the Liberals' dilemma, and here's the challenge for commentators who, until recently, were all out there arguing that the Liberals had to swing left to counter the Teals. Well, if the Libs had to go left, you say, many of you say, to beat the Teals, then what do you reckon needs to happen now? Now that it's One Nation, that hardline Conservative outfit, that's cannibalising Liberal votes? Because, you see, therein lies the problem. Too many commentators urging the coalition to go this way or that way, when the real problem is all along that the Liberals have been insufficiently left-wing or insufficiently right-wing. That's not the issue. It's that they've been nothing much at all. The problem is they have stood for nothing, fought for nothing, failed to offer up the sort of clear policy choices that people want to see come election time. Now, the last time the coalition won big, 2013, under my old boss Tony Abbott, a 46% primary vote. And when they won, the coalition then was a clear contrast with a bad Labor government, a government that had lost control of the borders, lost control of the budget, and was indulging in left-green climate obsessions. Now, not only did Abbott have a laser focus on Labor and all their stuff-ups, he articulated a clear way forward. People knew if they voted for him what they would get. He'd scrap the carbon tax and the mining tax. He'd revitalise the economy. Operation Sovereign Borders, he said, would stop the boats, and it did. And budget rules would be in place, such as no new spending without cuts to existing spending to restore fiscal discipline and end government waste. Now, where's that sort of clarity from the centre-right today? And as for this idea, this nonsense from some that Liberals have to return to the centre, come on, spare me. There's nothing that the Liberals have done since the Abbott era that's even been remotely right-wing. AUKUS, people point to. Well, AUKUS, that's hardly right-wing. It was promptly Me Too'd by Labor. And even the belated repudiation last year of net zero reflects a general move against energy self-harm, even from lefties, even from people like Tony Blair in Europe. And on the contentious issue of immigration, given that 34% of voters currently think that the party best placed to handle immigration is actually One Nation, on this issue at least, perhaps an even tougher right-wing Liberal Party is exactly what voters are after. Yes, the commentators are right to point out, as Paul Kelly did in The Australian today, that a high One Nation vote ultimately helps Labor because its preferences don't reliably return to the coalition. And you've heard me say that time and time again. Very little preference discipline on the centre-right, plenty of it between Greens and Labor. I agree on that point. But where Kelly and others are wrong is claiming that the coalition's political task now is to differentiate itself from One Nation rather than to reinvigorate its fight with Labor. The former coalition voters now parked with the insurgency are less interested in political theology than in having a politically clear, consistent and effective opposition to a Labor government they believe is taking our country backwards. Fighting Hanson is about as stupid as this current fight we're seeing inside the former coalition. Labor should be their target, not Pauline Hanson. Because what they see in Hanson, and sure, she's a less viable alternative as Prime Minister, but she's at least someone who's been consistent in her opposition to net zero, mass migration and the nonsense of three flags and welcoming people to their own country. So rather than attack her about doing something about the positions that she's calling for, because it's the tougher policies that people want to see the Liberals support. Right now, what makes Hanson stand out is leadership. And what makes the Liberals suffer is the lack of it. People aren't looking for a slick and polished performer. They're sick of that. They're sick of the political professional class, the insiders who promise the world and deliver very little. They want to shake the whole show up, and they are. That's what the coalition doesn't understand. Nor does Labor, to be fair, because this anger in the community is coming for the ALP as well. The best way now for the coalition to respond to this fractured voter base is not to chase voters in two different directions at once, but to offer Australians finally put on the table the changes they want to see for our country.